thank you for tuning into the Short Stacks. I'm Lisa Quintero, Young Adult Librarian.
And I'm Nick Barron, patron and sometimes volunteer.
This is the show where we talk to you about what we've been reading, watching, or listening to. And this week we're going to be talking to you about horror movies. Ooh.
Love the scary stuff.
Yes. But first,
library news.
So, like I mentioned before, we're not having the Halloween happening this year because of COVID. So instead, Miss Heidi has organized a few different Halloween activities. There's going to be a virtual costume parade. So if you haven't already submitted your photo of your child in their costume, you can go ahead and do that either on our Facebook or you can email them to us, shorewood@mcflis.org, which is MCFLS for Milwaukee County Federated Library System.org. And then there is also going to be a scavenger hunt this week, which I mentioned on our last episode. And so you can pick up a scavenger hunt sheet at the Children's Information Desk, and then you can complete the scavenger hunt. And once you finish it, you turn it into a librarian, and you'll get a special treat bag as long as you turn it in by Halloween or on Halloween. Miss Heidi is also doing a special Halloween story time on Thursday, October 29th at 9 a.m. It's going to be a virtual story time. She had been doing story times outside, but it's gotten too cold for that and too rainy, and so now it's mostly going to be virtual story times from here on out until things get back to normal. But yeah, other than that, we've got a Tinker Lab kit available on Monday, and the following week, the first week of November, we have our evening book club is happening. So if you're interested in the book club, check out the website for the book that Haley's reading with the club and for information on how to join them.
From the stacks.
So like I said, this week we're going to be talking about horror movies, and what drew you to horror movies, Nick?
So, as a young lad, I first fell in love with monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla, King Kong, like I was obsessed with those movies, and that of course led to, the Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Gilman,
mm-hmm.
all of the
men.
Yes, all the classic monsters. Men are monsters. Like all the classic movie monsters.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I just loved monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. Well, before I go and prattle on about monsters, what drew you to horror movies?
I think part of what drew me to horror movies is my dad watched a lot of horror movies when I was a kid, and I always kind of liked the thrill of being scared to some degree. And I remember my mom not wanting us to watch horror movies with my dad. But, it was the 80s. My parents were in their 20s, and my dad was just kind of like, whatever. It was a different time. We rode in the front seat with no seatbelt on. Parents left us in the car when they went inside the store to get groceries or whatever, 1980s, different time.
I remember all of those things.
Yeah, so my dad was like, no big deal. And so he would come home from work late at night because my dad was a line cook. He still is a line cook. And come home around, 10 o'clock at night. And that's what would be playing on TV sometimes. And so my sister and I would crawl in bed with him. And we would watch whatever he was watching. And my mom would, be like, they're going to have nightmares. Don't let them watch this with you. But I started watching horror movies when I was probably about 5 or 6, and I have loved them ever since. Some people probably think that I am warped because of them. I think that I turned out great. But yeah.
Do you remember what the first movie was that like terrified you or gave you nightmares?
I think the first one that I remember watching. There's two that I distinctly remember watching with my dad that like really freaked me out. The first one that I remember watching is Night of the Living Dead, the original George Romero movie, the 1968 one. And the scene where the little girl turns into a zombie and starts eating her parents, like that just like, I was just like, I don't want to eat my mom and dad. But that's what would happen to you, And so that was terrifying. And then the other movie that I remember that came out around the same time was this movie called Ghoulies. And I don't know if anybody knows this movie.
I remember it.
But this movie called Ghoulies is about these like folks who they throw this party at some big fancy mansion, and it came out, 1985. So came out when I was 3, but I probably watched it when I was about 5 or 6 because it was on TV. And yeah, so these people throw this big party at this big fancy mansion, and they summon these demons, and all of a sudden these demons that look like babies, little green babies with very sharp teeth, start popping up out of everywhere. And the scene that I distinctly remember was that one of them pops out of the toilet and bites one of the people who was involved in the seance in their nether regions. And I remember for weeks I could not go to the bathroom by myself. I made my sister come into the bathroom and sit on the bathtub in case a monster tried to drag me into the toilet and eat me. So yeah, my mom wasn't entirely wrong. There were nightmares, there were fears, but I also learned to overcome my fears. At least that's what I tell myself.
It's funny because there was the whole trend of movies like that, because Gremlins was so popular, and then there was Ghoulies, and I believe Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers, is also little. And
then there was like the Leprechaun movies.
That was later.
That was later, but yeah.
But yeah, for me, there was a post-apocalyptic movie called Damnation Alley, and I had never met anybody that had seen said movie, but I stumbled upon it somewhere, and I want to rewatch it. I know that it's available for viewing, but there was a scene where a guy gets consumed by cockroaches, and my brain, young brain, freaked out and melted on that. And then the other thing was similar to your story about the bathroom. So the movie The Blob, the classic horror movie The Blob. I was really little when I saw that, and it's this slow moving blob. It's not that scary, but I thought it was going to come up out of the drain in the bathtub and consume me. And so I remember my mom dragging me, kicking and screaming to take my bath, and then coming in with she's like, oh, at the end of the movie they killed it with ice, so she put like a glass of ice in the bathroom in case I needed to protect myself. So, but yeah, so I think for both of us, we get joy out of that.
The thrills, the adrenaline rush. But yeah, so I guess one thing I'd like to talk about is what your top 3 and my top 3 horror movies are, since we've watched so many of them over the years. And then we can talk about what we've been watching during our Halloween horror marathon, because every year we do this kind of marathon of sorts. Some people do 31 horror movies in 31 days. We try to do that, but we've never really accomplished it because we just have too much other stuff going on in our lives.
Though sometimes in fact, I think this year we got started in September.
We did get started in September.
But we just don't have that.
Yeah, that drive to do a movie every night or whatever. So yeah, but we'll talk about some of the ones that we watched this year from the library. But first, tell me about, what do you consider your top 3 horror movies? What are they and why? Yeah,
I struggled with this. And the 3 that I chose, I think they're good choices, great choices, my choices.
Yep. Own them.
But it was funny because there's kind of like a consistency that made me like, man, I'm stuck in a rut.
All right, tell us about it.
So my number one favorite is 28 Days Later, which came out in 2002. It is a movie about zombies, but they're not real zombies. They are people that have been infected with rage. This spreads through the population like wildfire. It's a really grim and dark and realistic horror movie. The score, they do a consistent playthrough of music from a orchestral type punk outfit, weird art punk called Godspeed You Black Emperor. And it just captures the mood so well. It's fantastic. Highly recommended. The complete opposite of that movie, but also in a very similar theme, Army of Darkness, which is got Bruce Campbell. He's a total knucklehead.
Yeah, so Sam Raimi movie, right?
Yes.
1990s?
1992. Okay. And that was the third Evil Dead movie, Army of Darkness. And I love all the Evil Dead movies. And the Deadites, which are the threat in the movie, are basically like zombies. They're demon zombies, but they're basically zombies. And that movie's a horror comedy. There's like a lot of Bruce Campbell fighting against himself or being attacked by I don't even. It's ridiculous. Highly recommend it. And then the classic Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead, somewhere in my teenage years, became like the Halloween night ritual, because in Buffalo there was a channel that would play it at midnight every single year, and it became a thing where, okay, every year I gotta watch Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
An absolute classic. And the kind of it's probably not the original zombie movie, but for most people it is the original zombie movie.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are yours?
Yeah, I see you have the zombie theme going on. Mine are kind of all over the place. I think my one of my very top ones is Halloween, which came out in, I think it was 1979. Let me double check that. But it stars Jamie Lee Curtis and has the villain, who is Michael Myers, and he wears the William Shatner mask. Yep. Very creepy. And all you hear is like the heavy breathing.
Yep. And the fantastic John Carpenter score.
Yes, it has a great soundtrack. And I think I really enjoyed that one, partially because as a kid it felt 1978. Sorry, that's when it came out. But yeah, as a kid it felt realistic to me, I guess, because it takes place in a town that's supposed to be in Illinois, even though it didn't look like the high school didn't look anything like the high schools in Illinois where I live, because it's all outdoor, because they filmed it in California.
In Pasadena.
Yes, but but the hedges and the leaves and the trees turning and everything, had that very fall feeling of Illinois and the Midwest. And growing up, I did a lot of babysitting, and like I said, we were kids in the 80s, so we were often kind of left to our own devices, and so it was a movie that kind of spoke to me, in that it felt very real to me when I watched it at first. I first watched it when I was probably about 7 or 8, and I remember my mom being really upset with my dad, because my mom and my dad went and saw that on a date when they first started dating, and my mom, I guess, had nightmares and like clutched my dad the entire time through that movie, because she was like, this is terrifying. My mom is not a scary movie person. She's never been a scary movie person. And so, yeah, when she found out that like my sister and I had watched it with my dad, she was pretty upset. Yeah. But I think, part of it is childhood memories, and part of it's just like a classic. It's iconic, like you said, the score, the scenes, Jamie Lee Curtis, and her outfits, and the end always creeps me out, Yeah,
and out of the in the 80s, the popular subgenre was the slasher movie. Mm. And I feel like out of the slasher movies, it's probably the most unsettling, because of the fact that it's got that realism about it.
Yeah. And you think like, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's like, how many of you actually like drive out to the country and end up, in this area where you're going to get murdered by this crazy farm family, but like, to me, this was like in the suburbs, and it's just like this guy who kills his family for some reason because he goes crazy, and then he comes back and starts killing people in this regular suburban neighborhood, and you're just like, what is happening? So that one's one of my favorites. Another one that is one of my favorites is It Follows, which actually came out more recently. That one is a film that kind of has a nostalgic feel to it. It came out in 2014, so it was the year before we moved here, and I actually watched it the year that we moved here in 2015. Yep. And it is the first movie that has given me nightmares as an adult. Most movies, I've watched so many scary movies over the years that they'll scare me in the moment, like I'll jump or whatever, but they don't give me nightmares. This movie gave me nightmares. Kind of like an allegory about sexual assault, and or some people think it's an allegory about like STDs, or
that's what the director said.
Yeah, things that like follow you that you can't really see. Trauma, kind of like traumatic things, and so it has a lot of really cool, creepy imagery, and it has this very 1980s aesthetic. Like, people use landlines and like there's not really the cell phone thing or anything like that, and the colors and the clothing and everything just kind of has that 1980s feel, but it's a modern film. I remember not really being thrilled with the ending, but up until the last 10 minutes of the movie where they're at the swimming pool, up until that point, I absolutely love that movie.
Yeah.
I just kind of feel like the director didn't know what to do with it and how to make it stop following them, and so they were just like, well, we'll do this thing, and if that movie ended right before that swimming pool scene, I would be happy.
Lisa has a problem with spoilers.
I'm not telling people what happened at the swimming pool. I'm just saying that there's a swimming pool scene at the end. I'm trying to do my best to not spoil things. I'm sorry.
But yeah, the thing about It Follows is there's a constant tension, because the thing that is following them is it's always ever present following them.
Yes.
And so it's a good movie.
Yeah. And then my third one is one that's also actually on your list, which is 1968, Night of the Living Dead, George Romero. And I liked the whole George Romero zombie series, and I've always enjoyed them because they're all different social commentaries on different things, and how society is at the time that they are filmed. And I just remember, like I said, of watching that as a kid and being freaked out by it and having nightmares from it. And it's one of those movies that, even though it's in black and white, you watch it and it's still super creepy.
Yep.
Because some other horror movies that are in black and white, there are some that are pretty creepy out there. Like, there's that one called Eyes Without a Face. I think I might have made you watch that at some point, where the person has transplants of faces, and they're that was super creepy too.
And there's even modern ones, like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Isn't that the one that was?
Was that quite? Yeah, maybe the vampire one.
That was Iranian.
Yeah. So yeah, there's I think sometimes in horror, people think that more gore and more blood and more color is what's necessary for it to be a good horror movie, and I do enjoy some of that stuff to some degree, but I tend to like a little bit of horror that's more psychological and cerebral than just the splatter gore stuff. I'm not a torture porn person. I can't watch, I know some people are really into Takashi Mike or Takashi Miike, or I don't know how you say that person's name.
Or the Saw movies.
Yeah, and I remember watching a movie with a friend of mine several years ago, where one of those movies is a Takashi Mike movie where some woman gets nails hammered under her fingernails, and I was like, I can't watch this. I can't do that. I can't. But I like creepy, but I don't like torture.
Yeah.
That's just. Yeah. I can't watch it.
They're two different things.
They're two different things. To some people, they're the same thing. To some people, they're and if that's your thing, that's your thing. But it's just not my thing. But yeah. So yeah, before we talk about what we've been watching recently, I just wanted to share one of our listeners, Lisa, another Lisa, not me, one of our listeners shared an article with us about horror movies, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Apparently, somebody did a study to determine what the scariest movie ever was. And so what they did, it was Forbes that they decided to do an actual scientific study. They called it the Science of Scare Project. They tracked the heart rates of 50 people of different ages who watched over 100 hours of scary movies. And after that, they were able to narrow down a list of what they concluded are 35 of the most terrifying movies ever made. And according to them, the scariest movie ever made is Sinister from 2012, which I think you and I watched. It's about Ethan Hawke, and he is a true crime writer, and he ends up moving his family to a house where they ended up finding a bunch of snuff films, and then the family slowly ends up killing each other off or something. So that one apparently is rated number 1, which I found interesting because I remember being scared during that, having some jump scares, but I don't remember it being that scary. But of those, let's see, It Follows, one of my top 3 is number 6. Halloween is number 14. 28 Days Later is number 16. And then, other than that, it looks like those are the only ones from our lists that are on there. But there are quite a few other movies on here that are great. It lists Hereditary, which is super creepy. It lists The Babadook, which is also super creepy. Yep. The Descent, which is about those women who go like cave jumping or diving. Spelunking, yes. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Exorcist, which is also good. Scream, which is okay.
Yeah.
It, which is also, in my mind, just okay. The Witch, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, which was great.
Alien. The Blair Witch Project, which I never really got the appeal of that movie.
What's funny is the Blair Witch, like when I was trying to think of like the ones that I've gone back, I saw the Blair Witch Project I think 3 times in the theater.
Uh-huh.
Because when it came out, I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was great. But yeah.
Yeah, The Shining's on this list. Get Out is on this list, but it's towards the bottom. I really like Get Out. I would put it higher up. But I thought it was scarier. Maybe it's a contextual thing in terms of what you consider scary versus what other people consider scary.
The real quick side note about it, or not it,
Get Out?
The Shining.
Oh, The Shining, okay.
The Shining, when The Shining came out and it was playing on HBO as a young lad, I remember everybody talking up certain scenes.
Uh-huh.
And so like it was one of those movies where I didn't ever watch it all the way through, and the parts that I watched were like between my fingers, like so that I could cover my eyes because I had heard such horrible things about what took place that it was like too hard for me to watch because I was scared.
Yeah. Yeah, this is interesting too because it also breaks them down by which movies have the biggest jump scares. So Insidious has the most jump scares. Sinister has the second most. The Exorcist 3, The Conjuring, and The Descent. But yeah, so if you're interested in taking a look at the list and everything that is on it, you can look up the Forbes Science of Scare project.
There you go.
So let's go on and talk about some of what we've been watching recently. So all these movies that we are talking about are things that you can find at the library. We've checked all of these out, most of them from Shorewood, but some of them I got from other libraries.
And all of these are actually fairly current. I after we went through a bunch of these movies, the
only one that's not current is Pulse. That was from 2006.
Yeah.
Everything else was from like 2019 or 2020.
But so I made a request. Okay, I want some stuff pre-1990 after this run. What
was your favorite of what we've watched so far?
Out of what we saw so far, that's a hard question. Because I liked different ones for different reasons.
All right, so tell me your favorites.
So I Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. I really liked
Tell us what it is about.
Let's get into that.
Okay.
So Don't Be Afraid of the Dark is a Guillermo del Toro movie. He wrote the script. He didn't direct it. But it is about an ancient deal is made with the Pope to give the teeth of children in exchange for keeping these fey creatures at bay.
Mm-hmm.
It's tooth fairies.
Yeah.
It's a like the fact that they made the tooth fairy into this very like creepy and insidious group of creatures
that just want children's teeth.
That just wants children's teeth. And
they don't care how they get them.
Yes. It was such a twist on the idea of the tooth fairy. I thought it was very clever. I don't know that it was my favorite movie out of these, but as far as concept, it was the most creative concept out of all.
I think that one was my favorite out of these.
Okay.
I liked the artwork because there's like all this really cool artwork because the original character that we see who's trying to work with these tooth fairies because they've stolen his son because he wasn't able to give them children's teeth in exchange for, them leaving him alone. So they took his son. He draws all these drawings and paints this mural. And I like the architecture because it takes place in this giant mansion and it's this couple and they are renovating this giant mansion. It stars Katie Holmes and I can't remember who the dad is, but and there's a little girl who comes to live with them and she's the dad's daughter. And she ends up, discovering the tooth fairies in the basement, and they kind of start coming out and talking to her and messing with things like little gremlins. And I thought that the art for the Tooth Fairies themselves was really cool too, because sometimes when you see monsters and gremlins and things like, like the baby ghoulies and ghoulies, like now watching it, I'm like, that's real dumb. But they did a pretty good job with the art of these, and I liked that aspect of it a lot. And I liked the little kid because she was kind of creepy. And I think they did a good job of casting that film.
Yeah. It's creepy. It's cool.
Yeah.
Probably the movie, and you're gonna laugh at this. Looking at the list, I think the movie that made me the most tense was 47 Meters Down, Uncaged. And so
we just watched this last night.
We watched this last night, and it is a shark movie.
Yes.
And
these girls go into these Mayan ruins in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico.
Xibalba.
Yes, Xibalba. They go to these ruins. They're scuba diving, and there happen to be these great white sharks down there who have no eyes because they evolved in these ruins, and so they evolved without eyes.
They're just blind. Yeah,
they're blind. And so slowly people start getting eaten off by sharks.
But the thing is, it had good jump scares, but it had tension the entire time because they're scuba diving and they get trapped in this underwater ruin. And so they're constantly giving you updates as to how much air they have left. Mm-hmm. And there's also, there's that implied nature of ruins where things can collapse and people can get stuck. Mm-hmm. And so because of the fact that there was this, we've got the threat of the sharks, and then there's
also nobody knows where they are.
And nobody knows where they are. So there's nobody that's going to be coming looking for them. There's just this constant threat that the combination of the sharks and the running out of air. I was just like tense the entire time in a good way. It made me feel. There were a couple of things in the movie that were absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the ending of that movie was so ridiculous.
But
it was also like ridiculous and bad in that like great ridiculous and bad way. Some movies are good bad, some movies are bad bad. This was a good bad.
But yes. Yeah, and so Lisa's normally the spoiler queen. I'm going to give some spoilers right here. So they set up a thing at the very beginning of the movie where they were supposed to go on a glass bottom boat shark tour, and they skip out on going on the shark tour in order to go scuba diving secretly, and it comes full circle at the very end when they finally escape the Mayan ruins. They escape Xibalba. They're out in the ocean and they see a boat and they're like, help, help. And then it's actually the glass bottom boat and they're throwing chum in the water so that the sharks will come to where they've just emerged. And it leads up to where everything gets real goofy.
And I totally called that would happen too. As soon as we saw the boat, I was like, let me guess, it's the glass bottom boat.
Yeah. And so, it made me laugh.
Yeah, it is ridiculous, but it did have a lot of good jump scares. It was a good light horror in terms of like not, it's not super dark, not super psychological. It's a good just monster movie, like if you like Jaws or anything like that.
And the other thing that made me really happy when I was thinking about it today, I was telling somebody at work today about it, and it hit me. I was like, and also, it's a shark movie where the sharks didn't get killed.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about Jaws, and I love Jaws, but I do not like that Jaws gets blown up.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, which of these others do we want to talk about?
So I really enjoyed The Hunt, and I know The Hunt has been one that has been checked out quite a bit and like has a lot of holds on it. And it stars the woman from the TV show Glow, and I can't remember what her name is off the top of my head. And it is a movie that is kind of like a mix of The Most Dangerous Game, which if anybody doesn't know what that movie is, it's an old movie from like the 60s, and it's based on a Rudyard Kipling story.
Yeah, I don't remember. I read it in middle school, but I don't.
And The Most Dangerous Game is a story about people hunting people.
Yep.
And then it's like a mix of that and like kind of like the Hunger Games.
Yeah. So since you're typing at the same time, I will. So it's a movie. It's directed by created by the people that did the Purge movies, and it is a assessment of class and
political ideology.
Yes. So essentially, a bunch of rich liberals acquire a bunch of poor, presumably right-wing folks, and decide that they're going to hunt them as for sport and for pleasure.
Yeah, and the main actress is Betty Gilpin.
Yep.
And it looks like the story is actually a short story by Richard Connell.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, and so things that jump out about it did have a lot of like, I never thought about this that way type of moments where how one side sees the other side, the city elites versus the rural the poor rural folks.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of interplay with that. Strong female lead, as well as
yeah, I guess what I liked about it was that it kind of examines our assumptions about people that we make, and the danger of making assumptions. I will not spoil what happens, but basically some very big assumptions are made about one of the characters that turn out to be not true at all, and there and other assumptions are made about the character that are just way far off base, and so and there's kind of a case of mistaken identity. And so I thought it was a really interesting movie. I thought considering our political climate right now, I thought it was interesting in that, right now people seem to be kind of at each other's throats, and, this movie turned that into a very real, literal people killing each other over politics and ideology.
I should note, there's the way that was just framed, it sounds really dark and too real. It's done in a light and humorous way at times in order to offset the messages that it's trying to convey.
Yeah, and I think that the main character carries it really well. Betty Gilpin from Glow. She, like Nick said, she's a very strong female character, and she just kind of surprises you at every turn. And I thought that she did a really good job. And you should check it out. Other than that, what else do we have on our list here?
Let's talk about The House at the End of the Street briefly.
Okay. So The House at the End of the Street was a movie starring Jennifer Lawrence, and that one I think was from last year or 2 years ago. And it's basically about a young woman and her mom who move into a house, and there is a guy who lives down the street, and his sister supposedly killed his family, and everybody kind of ostracizes him because of it. And so this girl's kind of soft-hearted, and so she befriends him until we see that he, at one point, she doesn't know this, but we see that he's keeping his sister locked in his basement. And whenever somebody's keeping somebody locked in the basement, they're probably not a very good person.
Yeah.
It's portrayed as like, oh, his sister went crazy and she killed the family, then she ran out in the woods and she died, and so he's just trying to protect her, and he locks her up in the basement, but he's got her like chained up down there and like keeps drugging her, and you're just like, this doesn't seem like a good thing.
The thing that we won't belabor this movie too long, because we would give away all of the.
Yes, I totally called the ending like 10 minutes into the movie. So.
But the thing that I liked about this movie is that it just gets darker and darker and darker and darker, because you're like, it starts off, sort of creepy, and then it's like, oh, he's not so bad, and then you find out that he's a little bit worse, and he's a little bit worse, and he's a little bit worse, and so I I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it too. And I think Jennifer Lawrence did a good job. And actually, that one's older than the other ones. That one's from 2012.
Okay. So The Curse of La Llorona.
La Llorona.
Yeah, La Llorona.
The Curse of La Llorona is part of the Conjuring universe, and I was actually very curious about this movie because La Llorona is a folktale, urban legend that's told in Mexico. And growing up, when I lived down there for a few years, we heard the story. We lived near a river, and we were told not to go play near the river without our parents or at all, really, because La Llorona would get you. And La Llorona means the crying woman. And so the story is that this woman, she was very beautiful, and the story in the movie is a little bit different than what I was told growing up. But basically, this woman, for some reason, decides that she has to kill her children, and so she drowns her children in the river, and then later she regrets drowning her children, and so she cries about them, and in order to assuage her guilt over killing her children, she tries to steal other people's children to drown them, to bring them into her world to be with her because she misses her children so much. And so I wasn't exactly sure how this movie is going to play out. I was a little worried that they would completely mess up the urban legend folktale aspect of it, but they did a pretty good job. And it actually had Latinx characters in it, which I was happy about, because I was also like, is this going to be completely whitewashed? Like, what's this movie going to be? And it had some good jump scares.
That was the funny thing about 47 Meters Down Uncaged, is that it takes place in Mexico.
There's no Mexican. There's the guy that's throwing the chum in the water at the end of the movie. He's like the only person speaking Spanish.
Ben, the first of the divers that
gets eaten by a shark.
Yeah, the first red shirt. He if I recall correctly, in the brief moment that they showed him before he was in scuba gear, that he was Latino.
Okay.
But I just noticed where we are on time, and so let's just jump to Ready or Not.
Okay. And then I want to talk about The Dead Don't Die.
Yes. Okay. So Ready or Not.
Okay, Ready or Not. Ready or Not is a movie that Angie actually recommended to me. Angie is our administrative assistant at the library, and she also really enjoys horror. And if any of you have seen the lovely horror display that we have across from the information desk right now, Angie put that together. And so, she overheard me talking with some of my colleagues about horror movies. I was talking to Jessie, who works at the front desk, about The House at the End of the Street. So Angie's like, have you seen Ready or Not? And I was like, no. And she's like, you should watch it. And then I also had a patron come in and tell me that I need to watch that movie too. And so it's basically about this woman who marries into this family. And this family is a very wealthy family, and they are board game designers. They're like, what's that big?
They bought a company similar to Milton Bradley.
Yes, like Milton Bradley. Yes, yeah, that's gonna. Then like, what's the name? Yeah, so Milton Bradley, like kind of like that, and they own this big gaming company. And so whenever anybody marries into their family, they have to play a game at midnight on their wedding night in order to become part of the family. Except for you put they made a deal with this Mr. I can't remember what the guy's name is, but they made a deal with some guy that's basically the devil. And long ago, the patriarch of the family on a boat. And so they have this special box, and you pull a card out of the box, and the card tells you what game you're going to play. And so if it tells you, you were playing Old Maid, you play Old Maid and you're fine. If it tells you you're playing, chess, you play chess and you're fine. But there's one card that can come out that is different than all the other cards, and it's the Ready or Not card, in which you have to play
hide and seek.
Yeah. And if you play hide and seek, basically everybody in the family has to hunt the new member of the family, so in this case the bride. And if they don't kill her before dawn, something very bad will happen to the family, or at least that's what they think. And so the whole movie is basically this woman running away from her fiance, now husband's family, as they try to kill her because she happens to pull the hide and seek card. And he does not prepare her for any of this. She doesn't know what she's getting into. He's just like, oh, it's no big deal. We just play this game at midnight. It's fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Once again, similar to The Hunt, this movie has class undertones, but they're different class undertones than The Hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very entertaining movie.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's as scary as some of the other movies, but it's very entertaining.
It's more like a revenge movie. I feel like it's more like a Kill Bill, because she is not having any of it, and she is just like, this is crazy, and I am out.
Yeah.
And so she.
And it's not her being terrified the whole time. It's like once she realizes what's going on, then.
She fights back.
Yeah.
And it was pretty rad. And she is so tough. Like, there was a scene where she's, like, pushing herself through, like, their wrought iron gate, and she's, like, her skin's, like, ripping, and I'm just like, girl, I don't know that I could do that, but...
And it's funny, too, because that was a scene where after they showed her get through the gate, I was like, why didn't she just go through the lower part where she wouldn't have gotten stuck? But anyways.
That part was hard. The other part that I was like, I'm not as tough as this woman... was when she fell into, they're like devil worshippers. So they have this pit of goats where they like throw the dead goats, and she like ends up falling into the pit of goats, and then has to climb her way out.
Yeah, that
one was rough too.
Yeah, it was good.
It was really good, but it
was you'll cringe.
Yes, you will cringe.
So,
but yeah. Other than that, the very last one that I would like to talk about is The Dead Don't Die, which is a Jim Jarmusch film, and it is another horror comedy, but kind of a different kind of horror comedy. If anybody,
it's such dry humor.
Yeah, basically, if you've ever seen a Jim Jarmusch film, I love Jim Jarmusch, so like I'm biased here. But yes, Jim Jarmusch. A lot of his movies have a lot of very dry humor and just kind of meta humor, and so it is a zombie film starring Bill Murray and Adam Driver and Chloe Sevigny and Steve Buscemi. And Danny Glover and Tilda Swinton and a bunch of different people. And so one of the characters is like aware of what is happening and it's meta in that like he's like, I know what's going to happen because it's in the script. And some people find that stuff really annoying, but the way that Jim Jarmusch did it, like I like it. And he
Adam Driver throughout the movie says, this is going to end badly. And then finally Bill Murray asks him, why do you keep saying that?
I read the script. And then Bill Murray's like, well, Jim didn't need the full script. You got the full script?
Yep.
And then they keep like replaying the theme song. Oh, Tom Waits is also in it.
Yes.
And he plays this like homeless guy that lives in the woods, and he like is watching everything happen, but nothing like bad happens to him. Steve Buscemi plays like a like racist guy who like goes around like trying to like harass people all the time, and he gets what's coming to him.
and the funny thing is that like they have the opportunity to warn him, and Bill Murray's character is just like, nah, and then Adam Driver's like, no, he's a citizen of Centerville, and so Bill Murray's like, we'll have somebody call him. But yeah, no, it's a very amusing movie. Like as far as I think my horror comedy goes, it's more of a Lisa horror comedy than a Nick horror comedy.
Yeah, it's campy, but it's campy in a different way. Yeah. It's like RZA from Wu-Tang Clan is in it, and he works for WUPS instead of UPS. Like if you like jokes like that.
Yeah. I feel like RZA was underutilized. But anyways.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I giggled the whole time, and this was my second time watching it, so.
Yep.
But yeah, if you're curious about what else was on our list, we had Pulse, which is a 2006 film about some people who get like sucked into the internet.
It's a remake of a Japanese movie, and it's not that they get sucked into the internet, it's that they download a virus, and the virus transports basically kind of like an entity into reality.
Yeah. And then other than that, we watched a movie called Ma, which is a very sad movie about a woman who kind of enacts this revenge plot against the children of a bunch of her classmates who bullied her in high school.
Yeah.
So both of those they're all right. But yeah, that's what we've been watching so far. If you have any favorite horror movies that you would like to share with us, feel free to email us at shorewoodstacks@gmail.com. We love getting fan mail. We actually received some fan mail from Carolyn last week where she told us that she really enjoyed our running podcast. And I saw her at the library, and she told me that she was really excited to watch that documentary about the guy who started the New York Marathon that we watched, Run for Your Life.
Yep.
So if you've got comments for us, if you've got questions for us, feel free to reach out. Like I said, we are at shorewoodstacks@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter via the Shorewood Library handles. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. As always, we hope you have enjoyed the show. Thank you for listening. And until next time,
be well.
The Shorewood Stacks was produced and recorded by Lisa Quintero and Nick Barron for the Shorewood Public Library. Music for the show is by Kevin MacLeod and is called Ice Flow and can be found at incompetech.com.